the new Mayor of London, Boris Johnson.
Overheating buses, empty cable cars and fantasy bridges. Boris Johnson's legacy after 8 years as Mayor of London was a string of expensive vanity projects that ended up costing the British taxpayer £940 million. Now each scheme followed the same general formula. Come up with a one-liner idea that would make a catchy headline and a great photo opportunity, and find a private sponsor to pay for it all in exchange for ample promotional opportunities.
Be bad.
You'll be bad. My cable car.
Lovely.
First came the Boris Bus. What better icon of London for Johnson to stamp his name on?
This is the most high-tech piece of motoring technology I've ever seen.
The new Routemaster was billed as a return to the glory days of London transport, with a nostalgic retro design that would bring back conductors, as well as having a hop-on, hop-off back door, and be more environmentally friendly. But the final design by Thomas Heatherwick ended up costing twice as much as a standard double-decker and has suffered from a host of practical problems. In summer, the upper deck turned into a mobile sweatbox with dodgy air conditioning, and they've proved to be even more polluting than regular buses. And they were finally retrofitted with opening windows at a cost of an extra £2 million to the taxpayer. Then came the famous Boris Bikes. Now the cycle hire scheme was actually the brainchild of his predecessor, Mayor Ken Livingstone, but that didn't stop Boris from claiming the idea as his own and promising mountains of cash in sponsorship in return. In reality, the bikes have cost the taxpayer £200 million since they were launched, and Transport for London subsidises the scheme by over £3 million a year.
This is the Rolls-Royce of bicycles.
Not content with conquering the roads, Johnson aimed for the skies. Now he'd always had a thing for dangling from wires, so he concocted a plan for this novelty cable car ride across the Thames. It was presented as a vital transport link that would be entirely paid for by private sponsorship from the Emirates airline company. But once again, it didn't quite turn out as planned.
Thanks to the foresight and wisdom of Emirates, this is a fantastic deal also for the taxpayer folks.
Costs ballooned to £60 million, making it the most expensive cable car project in the world, and leaving the public with an extra £24 million bill to pay. And it didn't prove quite as popular as Johnson had promised. Just 2 years after it opened, the cable car was found to have not a single regular user.
I think Londoners have been very frustrated and alarmed over the last few months to keep reading about money being wasted or misappropriated even, and I think it's time that we cleared that up and showed that we're going to deliver taxpayer value from now on.
The 2012 Olympic Games provided another opportunity for Mayor Johnson to adorn the skyline with another pointless bauble. He was worried that the main stadium might not have the necessary wow factor to enrapture visitors, so he concocted a plan for a gigantic steel sculpture that would all be paid for by the steel tycoon Lakshmi Mittal. This mutant helter-skelter behind me was the result, designed by Anish Kapoor, a kind of mangled roller coaster ride, but without the actual ride. It was intended as a money-making attraction to pay for the upkeep of the park, but in reality it ended up costing Londoners £10,000 a week to maintain. In 2016, this slide was added at the cost of a further £3 million in the hope of attracting more visitors to come and take the white knuckle ride.
3, 2, 1, click. There we go.
It boosted visitor numbers for the first couple of years, but last year it was back to making a loss of almost £60,000. Johnson's wider Olympic legacy hasn't quite turned out as he promised either. The Athletes' Village, which cost about £1 billion to build, was then sold for about half that amount to the royal family of Qatar. After over £11 billion of public money being spent on the Olympics, the rest of the park was supposed to provide opportunities for community-led housing initiatives, with half of all homes classed as affordable. In the end, the plots have been sold off to the usual volume house builders, and under Boris Johnson, only 30% of homes were affordable.
Do you even know the cost of a pint of milk?
And about 80p or something like that.
No, it's about 40-something-p.
Okay, I don't know how much a pint of milk costs. So what?
Well, don't you think you should if you're concerned about the cost of living?
How much is a loaf of bread?
I'm not standing for election. You are.
And then there were the projects that never even happened. A list of costly fantasies that somehow saw many more millions of pounds flushed down the drain without ever being built. There was Boris Island Airport, a bonkers plan to rebuild Crystal Palace, and lots of ideas for bridges, most infamously among them, the Garden Bridge.
Absolutely beautiful, I mean, stunningly beautiful project. A new garden bridge. I don't know quite what the point of this thing is.
This plan for a planted crossing was dreamt up by his old friend Joanna Lumley and once again designed by Thomas Heatherwick. Without any sound business case that we needed a bridge in this location, £43 million of public money was somehow spent on the project without a single brick being laid. Ultimately, his record as Mayor of London shows Boris Johnson to be a man concerned with the advancement of Boris the brand above all else. He's a man who recklessly blunders into hastily brokered deals without the slightest concern for the small print. And when he is finally held to account, he's already moved on to the next job and can't quite remember why he did any of it.
I've about as much chance of being reincarnated as an olive.
Why would you say that? Because politics is nothing
being
if not
blinded by a
ambition.
champagne one.
But it's nothing if not ambition. Why couldn't you think about being prime minister? You could if you wanted to.
Well, I suppose I could. I mean, as you've already pointed out, I could be president of the United States.
Yeah, well, I guess.
There's no, technically speaking.